In variation 7, the right hand starts with ascending C major scale spanning 2 octaves. In measure 4, the right hand starts with 3-note pattern, which is an ornamented version of the melody of the theme. For example, the first and third notes of the pattern of the 16th note spell the theme. Against these notes, the left hand plays a strong counter melody in octaves. Let me play the first phrase. The first phrase is repeated in the third phrase. Variation number 8 stands out dramatically because it is in a minor key, C minor, as the key signature indicates with 3 flats. Presenting the theme in a minor key means that some of the notes will have to be altered to conform to the minor scale. Let me play just the top notes and the first phrase to hear the difference. Another interesting aspect of this variation is the way the motives are imitated. A motive meaning a short musical idea, like a building block. For example, at the beginning, the 2-measure motive is in the soprano range, which is imitated in the lower alto range, and then in the still lower bass range, which is altered and extended to form a counter melody against the treble melody. Listen to the imitation and the counter melody in the first phrase. In the second phrase, the process becomes more intricate with overlapping imitations of a motive. Starting in measure 9, we hear a different, longer motive, first appearing in the soprano. Then the alto imitates it before the soprano is done. And then the bass enters in octaves before the alto finishes its motive, again extended into a longer counter melody. This procedure creates a texture of multiple melodic lines going on simultaneously. Let me play the second phrase from measure 9. The third phrase, starting in measure 17, is almost the same as the first phrase, but slightly embellished, for example, in measure 18, which is imitated by the left hand. Here is the last phrase from measure 17. This variation in minor sounds very serious and lugubrious in tone, conveying emotional intensity. As a result, it provides a big contrast to other variations. Variation number 9 returns to C major and conveys a much lighter sentiment. Although it looks simple with not too many notes or embellishments, there is a wealth of interesting details. The first phrase outlines the melody of the theme in the right hand with a chain of suspensions. Let me play the first phrase in the right hand. As in variation number 8, motives are imitated in this variation. The motive in the first measure is in the soprano range, which is imitated in the alto, then in the tenor, and finally in the bass. It is interesting that the range becomes lower with each successive imitation, saving the strong bass entrance until the end of the phrase. On top of all this, the soprano part keeps carrying on with its own melody, and again we hear an effect of multiple melodic lines sounding simultaneously, which is similar to what we heard in variation number 8. Here is the first phrase. The second phrase follows a similar pattern, but it becomes more intricate because the entries of imitation overlap with each other, which also happened in variation number 8. For example, the 4-measure motive in the soprano starts in measure 9. But before it is finished, the alto imitates it, overlapping with the soprano. And halfway through the alto, the tenor comes in, again overlapping. Then finally the bass enters in measure 15, overlapping with the tenor. Let me play the second phrase from measure 9. The third phrase, starting in measure 17, is slightly different from the first phrase because the melodic direction of the motive is inverted. In other words, instead of going up, as in the first phrase, it goes down in the third phrase. The melody is also embellished a little bit, and there is only one suspension. Here is the last phrase. The main feature of variation number 10 is hand crossing. It means that the left hand physically crosses over the right hand to play the melody in the treble. Below the left hand, the right hand plays an accompaniment consisting of 16th notes. In measure 4, the left hand goes back to the bass to play a counter melody. At the same time, the right hand takes over the melody, which is altered to include chromatic pitches, notes that do not belong to C major scale, for example, the F sharp and the E flat. Here's the first phrase. The second phrase, starting in measure 9, follows a similar pattern with the left hand jumping over to the treble to play the melody, and then back down to the bass to play a counter melody. The third phrase, starting in measure 17, is identical with the first phrase. The mood conveyed in variation 11 is quite different from other variations. It is very gentle, graceful, and lyrical in character. The tempo is adagio, meaning very slow. In the first phrase, the right hand plays a paraphrased version of the theme with suspensions in measures 3 and 4. The motive in the first measure is imitated by the left hand 3 times, gradually moving into a lower register, which is similar to what we heard in variation number 9. Here's the motive in the soprano. Then in the alto, and the tenor, and finally the bass. Let me play the first 4 measures with both hands. In measure 5, the imitation stops and the right hand plays a very graceful and delicate melody with 30-second notes. Then the second phrase in measure 9 starts a long flowing melody that is just so exquisite. This symbol in measure 11 denotes a turn, a type of ornament that sounds like this. And this symbol in measure 15 and measure 16 indicates a fermata, meaning that a note or a rest is elongated. The third phrase starting in measure 17 is same as the first phrase. This variation is very expressive with a beautiful singing quality and presents an interesting contrast before the big finish of the final variation. The last variation, number 12, brims with excitement and energy and sounds very bright and animated. The tempo is allegro, meaning fast. One big difference from all the other variations is that the meter is 3/4, meaning that there are 3 beats in each measure. You might remember that the meter of the theme in the previous 11 variations was 2/4. The right hand plays a paraphrased version of the melody that prominently features trills, sounding very elaborate. The left hand's accompaniment is played in a range that's lower than other variations, and it is embellished with a pattern that is similar to that of variation number 2. This is the left hand of variation number 2. And here's the left hand from variation number 12. We can hear that the left hand pattern is extended by an additional beat, and it's played in a lower octave. Let me play the first phrase. The second phrase features 16th notes in both hands, and it makes the music sound very embellished. In addition, the hands are much closer to each other in range than in the first phrase, where they were quite far apart. Let me play the second phrase. The third phrase is almost the same as the first, except that the left hand is played an octave higher. After the repetition of the second part, the second ending leads to a coda, a concluding section. This coda extends the last variation by 11 additional measures and provides a brilliant conclusion to the whole variation set. Let me play from the second ending. It is fascinating to observe how Mozart turned a little tune like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star into a set of variations. Although this composition might seem simple, it encompasses a variety of mood and texture with a wealth of melodic and harmonic ideas as well as intricate details. It is interesting to notice which aspects of the theme remain consistent and which other aspects are changed in the variations. In fact, each variation has a distinct identity so that the variations do not sound like monotonous repetitions of the theme. On the contrary, these variations keep us surprised and captivated throughout the entire set.